G'day everyone, my name is Zach and welcome back to Printed. When it comes to buying new models before we've painted our old ones, I'm sure I can say I'm not the only one who is guilty of that. So today I want to be jumping into the pile of potential and grabbing out some Terminators that I recently got in a trade and showing you exactly how I paint them super quickly and effectively so that hopefully you too can slowly chip away at your very own pile. A few months ago, I managed to get my hands on a bunch of Ultramarine models in a trade. There's a heap of different things in here and I'm so keen to get some paint on all of them. First up, we've got this awesome drop pod, which is, I would say, one of the most iconic 40k models out there. Then we have the legend himself, Roboute Guilliman. Believe it or not, but in the 7 years that I've been collecting Ultramarines, I have never once bought Guilliman. So having him finally is such a nice little addition to my Ultramarines army and can really make it feel like a complete collection. Next up, we've got the iconic triplets, Marneus Calgar and his Honor Guard. These models are 100% a must-have for all you Ultramar loyalists. Last but not least, there is also 10 of the new Terminators from Leviathan and a Tech Marine, just as something a little bit different. And of course, we can't forget that we've got all these beautiful bases. Today, I'm not going to be painting everything up at once. I'm just going to be jumping in and showing you exactly how I painted the Terminators. Nice, simple, and easy, and they come out absolutely fantastically at the end. But before we do that, I just want to say that if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. 92% of you guys at home watching are not subscribed to the channel, and I would love to see your friendly face join our community of hobby heroes. So if you do indeed enjoy this video and you want to stick around, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the new videos coming. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it and I'll show you how I painted these guys up. Now that everything is unpacked, I figured I'd tackle the bases. I was actually pretty happy with how they look now, but I wanted to add a little bit more depth. I did this by mixing a bunch of white Milliput Superfine. Now, if you want to repeat this yourself, don't worry about using exactly what I did. Green stuff, epoxy putty, or just plain old regular Milliput will work perfectly fine. I only use this stuff because it's all that I had on hand, but legitimately anything will work perfectly fine. Just make sure that when you are mixing Milliput, you mix it very, very thoroughly. I usually go for roughly about 1 or 2 minutes, which sounds like a very long time, but you do have to go for a while. Next up, I just smack it straight onto the bases, and using a bit of brute force, I just move it all around to the edges so it's nice and seamless. I want to make these look nice and realistic, so having the slight imperfect surface makes it look a little bit more natural. While the putty was nice and pliable, I did grab the models, wet their feet to stop them from sticking to the putty, and then just ever so slightly push them in to create an indent for the foot. This is going to help us a heap later when we start putting all the stuff on the models and give us a nice solid point for when we have to re-glue them back to their own bases. After that, I just grabbed another base and mashed the sides of the Milliput so it had this nice little rock texture added to it. To blend everything together, I did also grab some Vallejo texture paste and just applied it heavily over everything, except the foot holes. This helps blend all the different materials together and just create a nice cohesive piece. Now, I did get a little bit messy with the step, so I came back with my fine sanding stick and just removed anything from the outsides. Now, this might not be the best way to do it, but you can also just use a hobby knife if that's all you've got on hand. If you do, just be careful and gently scrape the rims very slowly until they're nice and clean. Or don't. If you like to keep them dirty, that's fine too. With all the prep work done and dusted, it's now prime time. I thought I could just be lazy and save myself a trip to Bunnings, so I decided to spend 20 minutes cutting masking tape and sticking them onto that. Which went about as well as you could think. Nothing stuck at all, and the models all fell off at the slightest movement. So I jumped in the car, swallowed my pride, and took a trip to Bunnings. I ended up grabbing these 2 massive rolls of double-sided tape, which after putting all the models on, definitely holds up very, very well. Next up, I just quickly jumped outside and primed all the models at once using a rattle can. I found that doing it like this is way, way faster than the airbrush, and as you can see, there's a few other projects I'm working on at the exact same time. Although the airbrush is fantastic for maybe priming a single model, if you want to get stuff done quickly and very effectively, use a rattle can. It's cheaper, it's quicker, and just so much better. Now, for all these steps, although I will be using an airbrush, you can get away with using a paintbrush. It will take you slightly more time because you will have to do it in a couple more layers and steps, but you can 100% achieve a very similar effect to doing so. Jumping over to my station, I came in first with some Macragge Blue. This is just to cover any of the areas that the previous owner didn't quite reach. Next up, just using some Liquitex titanium white ink, I came in and gave every model a really nice zenithal. You can always do this with the previous steps with a rattle can, but you'll have a lot less control over what you're doing and what your zenithal will overall look like. With the airbrush, I'm able to get in there and choose exactly where I want these highlights. As you can see, Doing it like this leaves us with a lot of room to come back in with some transparent contrast paints, saving heaps and heaps of time shading. Next up, I just grabbed some Games Workshop contrast paint, Talassar Blue, and gently went over our previous Zenithal. Using all the info they created, made some super quick and easy shading. Now when doing this, for the first pass, I went in super light, and then when I did a second coat, I went much heavier, and it just helped fill in all the details and really lock that blue color in. Now, that's all the airbrush steps done and dusted, so let's get these lads off the painting platform and get them sprayed onto their bases. Now, since I'm batch painting a bunch of models at once, I figured I'd do the bases for everyone at the same time. This is Marneus, his Honor Guard, and Guilliman themselves, but you most likely see dedicated videos for those guys in the future. When it came to painting them, I only used 2 colors, and it created some really interesting stonework. All you're going to need to do this if you're following along at home is some Dawnstone and some Steel Legion Drab from Games Workshop. First up, I'm just going to come in with my trusty dry brush and just go really heavy with some Steel Legion Drab and apply this over all the base's surfaces. When doing this, you just want to make sure that you have enough to cover the upper areas, trying to avoid too many of the recesses to make it look a little bit natural. If you really want to make that brown tone shine in some of the upper areas, I just came back in with the same dry brush, and instead of dry brushing it in, I just stippled it in into all the upper highlights. For the Dawnstone step, basically we're going to do the exact same as what we did with Steel Legion Drab. You can actually come in straight after using your Steel Legion Drab if you want it to mix a little bit more, but if you want the grey color to be a bit more pointy, just wait till it's fully dry and then come in very heavy with your dry brush. Doing it like this just makes the base have a little bit more color depth and a little bit more visual interest, because I don't like things just being dark toned with a grey dry brush over the top. Now that we're finished with the really messy painting steps, it's time for the bases to get glued to our models. Since we're gluing to a material that isn't plastic, we'll have to use some super glue to lock the models in. Plastic glue will not adhere whatsoever, so just make sure you grab some trusty super glue. I just put a couple dabs on the foot holes and then held the models down for roughly a few seconds before letting go. Just be careful that these won't actually be fully cured yet, so make sure not to bump them until the glue is fully set after roughly about 20 minutes to a half an hour. Ultimately, if you want to be super safe, you can wait overnight if you want to go that route. Now that all of that is done, it is time to jump into the super fun brushwork. This is where we get to see the models really come to life. Now, starting off with some Vallejo white grey, I picked out all the Terminator cruxes on the shoulders and the knee pads. Now, I thinned it with a slight amount of water, just enough to get it to go into all the nooks and crannies. I then prepped for all the metallics with some Black Legion contrast paint, just applying it over all the areas we're going to paint silver, and the undersuit that shows through the armor. You'll find this in things like his elbows, the back of his knees, and that sort of thing. Just be careful not to get any on the armor, because it is absolute pain to clean any of this up. You would have to reprime white and gently glaze at Talassar Blue so that you don't get any weird tide marks anywhere. I then picked out the Aquila on his chest with some Retributor armor, which took 2 thin coats. Now, I do actually like to do my silver metallics in a bit of a weird way that's not very traditional. What I do is I take some Vallejo aluminium and I mix in some lead belcher to help it cover. The aluminium flows very nicely and leaves us with a very bright silver, but mixing a little bit of that lead belcher in just helps it cover much nicer. I did come back in with some pure Vallejo aluminium and went over the ammo holder for this as well. This is to prep it for some nice Tamiya transparent red later. I absolutely adore the look of candy colors over metallics, so I decided to do that here. But you could also achieve a similar effect with a paint like Blood for the Blood God from Games Workshop. It's pretty quick and easy to do this. Basically, all you need to do is just grab a big glob on your paintbrush and dab it onto the surface until it's fully covered. I found if I try to paint this like a regular paint, it tends to just move everywhere, get very streaky, and doesn't apply nicely. So contrary to popular belief, I find that coming in with a very heavy coat is so much easier, and you just get much better coverage. The Purity seals are super simple to paint. Just chuck some Mortfang Brown over the parchment, and then with the wax seal, just put some white grey from Vallejo over it. Now, I've been experimenting with different paints, and I really like how wax seals look after putting that transparent red from Tamiya over the top. So I did exactly that, and with the red from the previous step, I just went over and put it all over it. It gives it a nice shine and really sells that waxy look. Now with all the base coats done and dusted, it's time to throw some shade at these bad boys. As blasphemous as it sounds, I don't actually own a pot of Nuln Oil, so I just go and make my own. Doing this, I just mix 50-50 of Black Legion with Lamy and medium, but it can also be a slight little bit too dark for my liking sometimes, so you can just adjust the amount of Lamy and Minion to really water it down and get more of a nominal consistency. I just threw this mix all over the silver areas and it shaded them super quickly and easily. For all the gold parts, I just grabbed some Seraphim Sepia and applied that all over. The white was then washed with a roughly 2-to-1 mix of Lamy and Minion and Gryph-Charger Grey. This just brings out the details for the most part, and it doesn't tone the white too much. Once everything was shaded, I just went in with the model's previous base coats from before we did the shading and highlighted the upper areas. This just helps reinforce those colors, and we make sure to keep it out of the deepest recesses so that it looks very, very nice. To finish off the purity seals, I quickly grabbed some pale sand, then highlighted the upper portions of the parchment, as well as just on the edges to really define them. With all those steps completed, there honestly isn't much left to do. These guys have been painted up super quickly, but so far I'm really enjoying it and loving the overall look. Now, we've just got the heads left, and to get those painted, since they were still attached to the sprue, I just had to clip them out and clean them up with my hobby knife. You're mostly looking for things where the sprue connected to them, and any mold lines that'll come up later. To get them painted up nice and quickly, I stuck them to this little box with some double-sided tape, so that I could prime them a lot easier and just paint them as a batch. Starting from a black prime, I loaded up some white ink and went to town on them, slowly building up the opacity until it was at a point that I was happy with. Now, I did actually go a little bit too dark with these guys, but you can also come in with some white grey or some white paint later and fix that up. I, for these guys, decided not to for the sake of time. For the bear head, I did actually go ahead and slap some Talasar Blue on the face mask and just a bit of Guilliman flesh over the skin. This shades everything nicely, and I hate painting faces, so I like to get these done and dusted super quickly. I don't want to overcomplicate this, and between the two paints, it basically does all the work for us. Next up, I picked out all the silver bits with Leadbelcher and eye lenses with some of this red Liquitex ink. You could use a red contrast paint or even the Tamiya clear red for the eye lenses, whatever your preference is. Now, I did also go back in for the lenses on the guns and the little greebles on their torso with that Tamiya transparent red just to really make it shine. Now, to attach the heads, I just cleaned all the paint out of the joint and then glued the heads in. I just used a bit of sprue glue when doing this because it attaches them nice and strong. Last but not least, let's finish up these bases with my custom rubble mix of grout and sand. I just slapped a bunch of PVA over the top areas and then dipped it in this mixture to cover everything. I did also quickly make a matching movement tray at the last minute. Long story short, I slapped a bunch of Vallejo texture paste and then covered in this grout mixture. If you want me to show you exactly how I make up my custom grout mix, I'd be more than happy to do that in a future video. Leave a comment down below if you would indeed like to see that. I did tip a bunch of my basing mix over the texture paste while it was still wet, making sure to wear my respirator when doing this, as it does kick up a lot of dust, and grout is the last thing that you want to see in your lungs. Now, I finally finished up by dusting all the excess off and let it dry for about an hour, then just came in with some static grass to add some life and help these models match the rest of my Ultramarines army. Last but not least, I just picked out the base trim with some Steel Legion Drab to match the rest of my army, and with that said and done, these models were all fully completed. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and like to get a little bit of an insight into how I paint my Ultramarines up super nice and quickly. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for getting this far into the video. I really appreciate you. If you did indeed enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join the 8% of people who are subscribed and watching my videos. I would love to see your friendly face join our amazing community of hobby heroes. Before I do the big reveal, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy hobbying. Bye.